only look at the Second World War. Those who caused deaths of 50 million people are now trying to preach us against humanity, and we believe that that is a very sorry state of affairs indeed. In Rwanda, they killed 1.5 million people. In Algeria, they killed as many people, and now, with no shame, they are preaching to us regarding humanity. They should take a hard look in the mirror first. See what they have done in the past. In our past, you cannot find any such incident. This humanitarian approach of Turkey should not be labeled as weakness. Those who do that will see the iron fist within our velvet glove. Whatever we're going through recently should be reviewed under this light. On a global scale, I think the world is going through restructuring, and the symbolic area of struggle of our times, like I said previously, is no doubt the Syrian territories. Since the very beginning of the Syrian crisis, we have been embracing those who fled Syria to save their lives, and also, on the other hand, we have been trying to ensure the security of our borders. We always hoped that this conflict would be resolved amicably, and for that we reached out to the regime, to everyone else who was involved in this bitter conflict. We worked really hard for a resolution. In 2015, the G20 summit was held in Antalya, and we called out to all the global leaders and proposed concrete plans and designs such as a no-fly zone. This no-fly zone issue is not something new on our agenda. During the presidency of Obama, President Obama actually, we were advocating for that. And I talked to all the world leaders. I talked to President Obama at the time, and I mentioned this quite emphatically because there were threats against my country, and millions of people were coming to Turkey, and of course there was only so much Turkey could take. And I asked the world leaders to assume responsibility in this regard, and unfortunately they didn't take any concrete steps. Our ancestors have this great saying, and also, you know what these people say? No other country has done this. They say to us, well, that's great, we are proud of that, but by talking about honey, you don't feel sweetness in your mouth. So they have never ever supported us in a concrete fashion. Yesterday, at the European Parliament General Assembly, they were debating a no-fly zone. Actually, we brought this proposal when millions of people were dying because of the bombardment of the regime in Syria, when there was a lot of bloodshed at the time. No one really paid heed to this proposal of ours, and right now Turkey is trying to cleanse Syria of terrorists and tries to prepare it for the rightful owners of the land, and again this is being proposed. I do believe that the end of EU will come because of this lack of sincerity and this hypocrisy. You know what's going on in Europe, Brexit, none of this is happening by chance. And we do not pay attention to these words coming from Europe. When I say we will open the gates, they get hyped up. But they should not, because when the time comes, these gates will be opened, can be opened. Why don't they host hundreds of thousands of people and see for themselves how these things are and see how they deal with it? They have the money, they have the strength, but when 100 people go to Greece via the sea, or 200 people, you call us by telephone and say, oh, 200 people, 300 people have gone to the islands, Greek islands. We have 4 million here, 4 million, and you don't say anything about that. And we are determined. For years now, despite all our efforts, the Syrian crisis was not resolved, and this terrorist organization under the name Daesh came into the picture, and the crisis became much more difficult to resolve. And these terrorist organizations in Syria also started to target Turkey. On the one hand, they started harassing our border towns, and also in our large cities, the PKK and Daesh instigated several suicide attacks. Of course, in the last 6 years, because of these incidents, many other incidents were triggered in our country, and faced with this bleak picture, our determination for counterterrorism and in terms of our regional policies, we decided to go through a fundamental change. In order to eradicate the terrorist threats against Turkey, we decided to eradicate them at the source, not just in Turkey, from Iraq to Syria. We took decisive steps to put an end to terrorism once and for all. And you, when you go to your towns, when you go to your districts, you will be ready for this struggle. We eradicated terrorist organizations, paralyzed them in their dens, and we did not tolerate terrorists inside Turkey either. One of the objectives of the 15th of July coup attempt was to actually collapse Turkey's counterterrorism efforts. Thanks to God's help and thanks to the courage of our nation, we frustrated these plans, and we survived that coup attempt as well. Right afterwards, with the Euphrates Shield operation, we made our position apparent, and with the Olive Branch operation, again, we frustrated the plans of some quarters. 365,000 refugees went back to this region, and this was achieved thanks to the steps Turkey took in Syria. All of this process, during this entire process, we maintained our political and diplomatic efforts in Idlib. Thanks to the support of Russia and Iran, we created a relatively stable condition, and we saved the lives of hundreds of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and we prevented millions of people from being displaced. We always respected Syria's territorial integrity and the political unity in Syria. We don't have any interest in the Syrian territories. We have no such plans at all, but there's another subtle difference here that needs to be emphasized. In Syria as well and in Turkey as well, we have no problems whatsoever with our Kurdish brothers. Our problem is with terrorist organizations and no one else. Now, you look at the West, and they endlessly talk about the Kurds. We have no problem with our Kurdish brothers. We are against the terrorist organization. They shouldn't misconstrue this fact, and they shouldn't distract people by saying this, by not naming terrorist organizations, because when they say Kurds, our Kurdish brothers are equated with terrorists when they use this discourse, which is very wrong, and we need to resolve this, I believe, because we, since the time of Idlisi, Bitlisi, all the way to Selahattin Ayyubi, we have always, with our Kurdish brothers, we have always coexisted with our Kurdish brothers. We have always lived in peace side by side in this geography, and this remains the case for today, and that will be the case in the future as well. We have always seen military option as the last resort. Dear friends, this is how we got to the point of Operation Peace Spring. Since we cleansed Afrin of terrorists, we said always that we wouldn't condone any terrorist structures to the east of Euphrates. Maybe hundreds of times we repeated this message, but there is one thing that really frustrates us. And it is this: the leaders of these big countries, powerful nations, side with these ringleaders, with heads of terrorism, and they try to get together with them around the same table and solve this. But this beggars belief. How can you accept a terrorist as a counterpart, as an interlocutor? How can you then engage in counterterrorism? Why do you then organize these counterterrorism meetings, these international events? Because you spoil these people, you provoke these people by getting together with them, and this is why we are in this mess right now. And here's what we say: if the promises that are given to us are not kept, then we will have to implement our plans with our own means. And we have said this repeatedly. If what we say is not respected, then actually that's why we initiated this operation, because what we said was not respected. But we always respected politics and diplomacy. That's why before every step that we took, very clearly we communicated to our interlocutors what our intentions were. When we started Operation Peace Spring, we informed the United States of America, likewise Russia, we informed them, and likewise Iran and the United Nations likewise were informed by us. And then we understood at a later stage that they didn't like the fact that we merely informed them, not instead of seeking their permission. But actually, there's a terrorist corridor, a corridor of terrorism, that was right across Turkey's borders, and we do not need permission from anyone to eradicate such a huge threat. We exhibited the same level of determination on the ground as well, and we achieved a 120 kilometer width and 32 kilometers of depth, and we captured this area only in 9 days. And right now, the size under our control is 4,022 kilometers. Of course, this was not easy because terrorists shelled our border towns and hit us with missiles, and we lost 20 lives as a result. And 148 citizens were wounded. On the Syrian side, in the armed conflict with terrorists, we lost 7 soldiers, and also members of the Syrian National Army lost 96 brothers. They fell martyr. Also, with 90 soldiers, 90 of our soldiers were wounded, and 368 members of the Syrian National Army were wounded. Some people say that, question why we are together with the Syrian National Army, and this is the greatest answer to them, because they did not leave our soldiers alone on the ground. And thanks to their support, our soldiers fought courageously in the region. These people who level these allegations against us know nothing about politics. The only thing that they know well is just to talk. And 787 terrorists died or killed. And some quarters outside Turkey and inside Turkey criticized us unfairly, but something that needs to be assessed at a later stage. That's why I do not wish to develop on this for the time being. This picture emerged in the region, and our interlocutors have started to listen to us. We sat down with the American delegation that came to Turkey. We explained our intentions, our objectives to them unequivocally. At the end of the day, we decided to pause the operation for 120 hours, and they promised to us that the terrorists would leave this region, and we reached an agreement, a 13-article agreement, and we also announced this to the international media outlets as well. And this pause came to an end at 10 p.m. on Tuesday, and the American side guaranteed to us that all the terrorists left the site of our operation. We received a written confirmation of this. Now our soldiers and the Syrian National Army are scouring the region, deactivating traps, and if they meet terrorists, then we will have the most natural right to topple them down, because we received a written confirmation as to their departure from the region. And as such, we have brought the Operation Peace Spring to a successful end. Dear friends, between Ras Al Ain and Tel Abyad, we created this safe zone, and this is the first step of our efforts. And Tel Rifat to the west, Manbij down south, all of these areas are actually within this plan. And the hasty steps taken by the terrorist organization and by the US resulted in a complicated picture. To the east of our operational field, you have Kamışlı, and to the west, you have Ain el Arab. And this region was handed over to the regime forces under the aegis of Russia. The same game is being played in Manbij. Our objective is to make sure that our borders are cleansed of terrorists, and that's why we had to make new assessments based on this new picture that we are faced with. On Tuesday, we had the opportunity to get together with the Russian president, President Putin, and at the end of these talks, we also reached an agreement regarding the border area that fell outside the operational area. And in order to completely eradicate terrorists from our border, we reached this 10-article agreement, and we also shared it with national and international media outlets. And as per this agreement, starting at noon yesterday, within 150 hours, the members of terrorist organizations are to go outside, 30 kilometers outside our borders, and as such, this whole area will be cleansed of them. The first 10 kilometers of this 30-kilometer area, except for Kamışlı town center, will be the scope of Turkish and Russian joint patrols. And at the end of the designated area, if the terrorist organization members can be kicked out of the region, then this agreement will have been successful as well. But if the terrorist organization continues to harass us from this region, then we will reactivate our action plan in these areas as well. At the end of the day, we are talking about a 480-kilometer area to the east of, square kilometer area to the east of Euphrates. 120 square kilometer is actually directly under Turkish control. The remaining area, like I said, with Russia, we are keeping everything in check. Of course, just like any agreement, this agreement with Russia lays down the common denominator that can be agreed upon by both parties. But Turkey's sensitivities and Turkey's attitude remain the same all throughout our borders and within Syrian territory. We're never going to tolerate these terrorist organizations establish a structure that will threaten our nation. And such a structure would be against Syria's territorial integrity anyway. In these safe areas, 1 to 2 million people from Turkey will go back to this safe zone. We will achieve their resettlement, and with the support of the international community, we are going to execute this project, and actually we will start talks immediately. We believe that the real solution will come thanks to the participation of all segments of the society in Syria, drafting of a new constitution and free and fair elections as a result until the new administration comes into power. Subsequently, we will continue these efforts. At the 30th of this month in Geneva, there's a meeting which is of paramount importance. In Astana, in Geneva, these talks are underway, and hopefully a reasonable result will be achieved that will be acceptable by all. Syria's territorial integrity and political unity depends on the success of this process. Otherwise, dear friends, no one is going to respect the Damascus administration, and chaos in the country will continue. Everyone who cares about Syria should work for the success of this process. New constitution efforts, and then the new administration, election of the new administration will be a test where everyone's intentions about Syria will be tested. Our sincerity about this and our hard work about this cannot be denied by all. There are those who want to derail the process by using terrorist organizations or the regime, but we will reveal their true colors if that happens. We are never going to let anyone use the Syrian public and use them as pawns, because we are the country that has paid the highest price because of this conflict. Dear friends, these agreements with America and Russia, if they succeed, then well, the success of these agreements are actually the success depends on the eradication of PKK-YPG and Daesh activities across the border, and we have been saying this to our counterparts, to America, to Russia, the regime, or any other power. If any of these terrorist organizations are reassessed or reutilized by changing their flags, their insignia or uniforms, we're never going to fall for that. And if that happens, we will stick to our own route, and we will do that by using our own means, and we wouldn't care about the magnitude of the price of such an effort. This game was played a number of times in the past, but right now where we are, the entire world has accepted that the PKK and YPG are but the same organization. For years, Daesh was used as a pretext to protect the PKK and YPG, but now it is out there for everyone to see that these two organizations are like two sides of the same coin, and it is quite sad the international community was exploited by these two terrorist organizations. Large states actually took ownership of this sad orchestration. On 9th of October at 4 p.m., Turkey initiated Operation Peace Spring, and that operation actually frustrated these plans and revealed the true colors of everyone involved. With this operation, we didn't just focus on our border security, but we also created an opportunity for our Syrian brothers to go back to their countries, and also thanks to this operation, we were able to give many states and many people the opportunity to free themselves of these terrorist organizations. And this is one of the reasons why our country was under so much criticism, because the chaotic state of affairs in Syria for a long time was used as a pretext to conceal some projects and some behind the scenes machinations, especially many people in Europe, in America, and also the regime, many people try to conceal their failures thanks to these terrorist organizations. But now these terrorist organizations, well, are hosted by some people in the U.S. Senate, in the Congress, in the U.S. Since when? Since when have they become such good friends with terrorists? How come they help these terrorists, reach a helping hand to them? There will come a time when they will pay a very heavy price for this. With Operation Peace Spring, everyone's true colors have been revealed. And to those who are engaged in anger seizures against Turkey, here's what we say to them: the game is now over. Come, let us join our forces for a final resolution to this conflict, for our countries, and for the welfare of the Syrian people. And There is no one in the world who can side with terrorists and try and accomplish the same goal. That's why I would like to call out to the entire world in the name of democracy and in the name of rule of law, and I implore everyone to accept that PKK-YPG is almost at least as dangerous as Daesh. When we do that, we will not have resolved the crisis in Syria only, but we will have achieved something really significant for the future of our world. Inshallah, Operation Peace Spring and the subsequent process will be auspicious and will bear positive results. With these sentiments, I would like to wish every success to our district governors, compliment them, and I also would like to wish you every success in the towns that you will go to. But like I said, forge good relations with the people. Do not be stuck up in your ivory towers. Always be knocking on people's doors. Always host them at your office as well. Always invite them. Always forge good relations, warm relations with them. I greet you all once again with my deepest regards. May God help you all. Thank you very much indeed.
President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan speaking there in Ankara, criticizing those who have labeled Turkey's operation as a crime against humanity, saying that you only need to look back 50 years to see that those who are criticizing us today are responsible for 50 million lives, and the horrible atrocities in Rwanda should not be preaching lessons to us, referring to Turkey. All right, let's bring in our diplomatic correspondent, Hasan Abdullah, who is in Ankara and has also been listening into the speech. Hasan, sort of rather than starting off with an operational update on what's going on in northeastern Syria, the president, while he was addressing these district governors in the nation's capital, talked about the hypocrisy of certain nations and talked about Turkey's principled stance, did he not?
Absolutely, Alijan. The president there said that Turkey has a 911-kilometer-long border with Syria, and those countries, referring to the West, who have been criticizing Turkey, they have no border with Syria, and they're not directly affected by the situation in Syria. The president called on those critics, referring to those Western countries again, saying that perhaps they should try and host a few 100,000 refugees and then see how they feel about it. And he said that Turkey has been hosting about 4 million Syrian refugees without complaining about it. Furthermore, he said that Turkey has no intention of affecting the territorial integrity of Syria. Rather, it wants to protect it. Turkey has no imperialistic designs as opposed to some others who have been critical of Turkey. And he also criticized how this narrative is misconstrued that sort of links PKK with Kurds. President said that, saying that the Kurds are equal to the PKK is an insult to the Kurdish population, the overwhelming majority of who have no links to the PKK terrorist organization, and they should not be associated with a terrorist organization. He also talked about Turkey's plans to continue the work for the establishment of sustainable peace in Syria. He said that Turkey is the one that has been pushing so hard for the formation of the Constitutional Committee to bring about free and fair elections in Syria. And he said that there are some who have been plotting against this plan because they have agendas and they have been concealing their failures as a result of the chaos in Syria. Alijan.
Hasan, I mean, just to sort of add to one of the points that you were making with regards to the PKK, I think the president was trying to say that these are the same sides of the coin and that this group, whether it's the PKK or the YPG, is as dangerous as Daesh. So that's sort of like a message that he is trying to sort of hammer out. Let's also talk about this discord in the narrative in the West about the relations between Turkey and the Kurds. So often, when we look at Western media specifically, it's often labeled as Turkey's operation against the Kurds. And I think the president was trying to underline that Turkey needs to do a better job in terms of combating this misinformation, this perception that Turkey is actually doing that. It's actually a specific group that Turkey is having a problem with that just happens to be Kurdish.
Absolutely, Ali Can. I've been talking to Turkish officials about this, and interestingly, earlier, one of the Turkish officials made a very interesting point. He said that basically suggesting that Turkey is at war against Kurds is the same as saying that if America targets the Taliban movement in Afghanistan, if someone was to come out and say that the Americans are at war with Pashtuns, or, for example, if America targets Al-Qaeda, someone was to come out and say that America is targeting the Arabs. So the Turkish officials have been saying that it's very clear, and this discourse is deliberately muddled like this, and this is pure propaganda and basically trying to play on ethnicity. But Turkish officials say that there's a long history, and we heard the president there earlier saying that there is centuries of history of Turks, Kurds and others living happily together, and he gave the examples of a number of prominent Kurdish leaders very well respected by the Turks and the Muslim community at large, like Salahuddin Ayyubi. So for the Turkish side, this is a very clear matter. This is not a matter of misunderstanding. Turkish officials say that this is a deliberate and a nasty propaganda attempt to try and equate the Kurds with the PKK.
All right. Our diplomatic correspondent, Hassan Abdullah, live for us in Ankara on the latest from the president's speech. Thank you for that. Well, the President Erdoğan, has criticized the European Union's General Assembly decision to create a no-fly zone over Syria in his speech just now. Take a listen.
Biz bu teklifi Suriye'nin dört bir yanında.
Yesterday, the General Assembly of the European Parliament proposed creating a no-fly zone in Syria. We made this proposal back when hundreds of thousands of innocent people across Syria were being killed by bombardments of the Syrian regime and the warplanes of other powers. In those days, when the blood was flowing, no one cared about this proposal. Now, while Turkey is clearing terrorist organizations from Syria and making it ready for the return of its real owners, suddenly they bring this issue to the agenda. The end of